marriage, but we're going to talk about a specific part of marriage, I guess. Each semester I teach there's a marriage class as part of it. And the one this semester is on how to perk your marriage up a little bit. How to brighten, lighten, and spark it up a little bit. Let me share with you, there is a cycle, if you will, in marriage, or there's sort of a process that marriage goes through. And it starts with, I've just had 3 of my grandchildren get married, 2 grandsons and a granddaughter. And my granddaughter's been married a little over a year, and my grandsons just got married this last summer. And so as you watch them with their fiancés, or they're newly married, they are just darling. Sometimes they're not darling because they're too physical, but mostly they're really, really darling, and they just glow. They, the other one walks into the room and it's like somebody turns this light bulb on in them, and they gravitate towards each other, and we're in family gatherings, they just sit by each other and they cozy up, and there's just so fun. There's that energy, there's sparks that fly. And do you remember, it's thinking back for a while for some of you. For me, it's thinking way back. But do you remember when you were in that age, in that season of marriage? Some of you look like you're really trying to remember. It was back there a while. You remember that. As I watch them, it reminds me that in that time, it's usually engagement up to the first 2 years of marriage. It's what the big they, whoever the theys are, refer to as the infatuation period. The infatuation period. Elder Robbins has written a book about love is a choice that is a great book to read. But he talks about this period as being the infatuation period. And what he means is, when you have found the right person, and you've been married in the right way, then it doesn't take any energy to love that person. You don't even think about loving that person. You just love them. You're thinking about little things that you can do to make them happy. You're thinking about their favorite treats, and you're thinking about, if they say, oh, do you want to go out this weekend, or let's go play miniature golf? It's, yes, let's go, let's do it, yeah. And you have energy for the relationship, and you just, it just comes, it bubbles out of you, and it takes no effort. What I want you to realize is it takes no effort. It just naturally flows. Well, I hate to tell people that that's not real love, but that's not real love. That's infatuation. Real love is when you make a choice to love. That you make a choice to do loving things. And this is where problems in marriage began. The seeds, if you will, are planted in this period, because when our preconceived idea is that a good marriage continues at that level of feeling and enthusiasm and an energy, then when it starts to fall off at all, we begin to think we're falling out of love. And the truth is, you're not. If we lived, I've been married this summer, I will have been married 50 years. It's our 50th wedding anniversary this summer. If I lived at that high intense feeling for 50 years, by now I would be totally exhausted. So love grows and it matures. And what I have now is so much better. so much more fulfilling, so much more gratifying, and fills my soul much more than that high, romantic, energetic infatuation. It doesn't mean romance is gone. It doesn't mean that the energy is gone. It means that it deepens, and it's filled with deeper understanding and deeper commitment and a deeper sense of sanctified romance. In the beginning, the romance is a lot physical, and that's good. It's a gift from Heavenly Father, and that gift causes couples to come together and get married. That physical attraction and need, it's wonderful. And then it helps us to have families, want families, and create them, and it's wonderful. But it grows into something that's deeper and has deeper meaning and understanding and commitment. Romance or physical attraction is essential. Affection is essential all the way through the relationship. But it changes. It changes, and it becomes more fulfilling, and it becomes just sacredly precious as you get further in, but you develop that, you grow into that. So what's important is that after these first 2 years, and we start falling out of the high intensity, romantic part, and start getting on with real life, if you will, this is about the time you're out of college. You may have 1 or 2 years left of school. Some of you have gone on to professional school, so that may be, you may be in school for another 4 years, which that also happens. But mom has the first baby, and dad, and so now you're starting a family. Now he's continuing school, and he's also trying to have a job, and he also has a church calling. And so he becomes very, very committed, and his time isn't just focused on you. And he has a lot that he's involved in doing, as well as you. And you're involved in baby number 1, and then baby number 2 comes along, and you're staying up late, and you're tired. And now it starts that this is where you have to start putting effort, conscious effort, into retaining and building and sanctifying the relationship. And President Nelson calls it nourishing the marriage, that we need to continue to nourish the marriage. And what that means is that we need to be intentionally, we've talked about intentional parenting, now we need to be an intentional marriage partner, where being a marriage partner the first 2 years and in the courtship required nothing from us. It was just there. Now, being married and being a good partner requires intention. And just like we talked about intentional righteous parenting, an intentional marriage partner is one who thinks about and considers the well-being of their spouse first. But as we get into this parallel life, part of life, what happens is we consider our well-being first. And it's because we have unreal expectations towards what a marriage should be. All frustration in marriage comes from unmet expectations. So when you become frustrated in any part of the marriage, it's because you have an unreal expectation that's not being met. And so when you become frustrated, it's imperative that we look and find out what was the expectation. In other words, you stand back and you say, what is it that's causing me to be unhappy here? What is it that's causing me to take offense or to withdraw or to feel like this marriage is not what I want it to be. Any of them want. So let me share with you a story. I love this story. It's one of my favorites that I like to use with marriage. It's called What Women Want. Look up 32. Alma. King Arthur, you know King Arthur in Camelot. King Arthur was ambushed and imprisoned by the monarch of a neighboring kingdom. The monarch could have killed him, but was moved by Arthur's youth and ideals. So the monarch offered him freedom as long as he could answer a very difficult question. Arthur would have 1 year to figure out the answer. And if after that year he was to come back to the monarch, if the answer was good enough, he would be granted his life. And if the answer was not good enough, then he would be executed. The monarch had the right to kill him. Well, you know, he made an oath and a covenant like Nephi and Zoram and promised he would come back. And so the question was that he would have to answer is, what do women really want? So he went back to his kingdom. And, you know, he had all the knights at the round table, and he asked all of them, you know, what do women really want? And they all had their ideas and opinions, but none of them seemed like good enough to save his life. And so then he went throughout all of Camelot and asked all the women, you know, what do women want? What do women want? And you know what? Quite frankly, sometimes women don't know what they want. But they know when they don't have it, but they can't identify it as to what they want. So their answers weren't exactly life-saving. So the year progressed, and it went on, and finally it came to getting really close to the time when the year would be up. And Gawain was his number one knight of the Round Table. And so he came to Arthur, and he said, I know where you can get the right answer, but the price will be heavy, and I don't know if you'd be willing to pay the price. And Arthur, you know, he's only got a few days left. He says, well, where is it? What do I need to do? Where do I go? And Gawain says, well, there's a witch who lives at the edge of the forest. And she'll have the answer. But I don't know what she will, you know, what the price will be. And so Arthur said, fine. And he got on his horse and he rode out to the edge of the forest, and there was this gross little hovel, and he knocks and said, the witch appeared at the door. And she was hunchbacked, hideous, had one tooth, smelled like sewage, made obscene noises. Never had he encountered such a repugnant creature. So the witch said she had the right answer, but her price would be that she wanted to marry Gawain. Arthur said, no way. And he rode back to Camelot. And Gawain was waiting right at the gate to see what had happened. And he said, what happened? What happened? What's the answer? And Arthur said, I was not willing to pay the price. And Gawain says, what was the price? And he says that she wants to marry you. And Gawain says, fine, I'll marry her. To save your life, I'll marry her. So go get the answer. So he went and he found the answer, and the wedding was set up. And so the answer was, what a woman really wants is to be in charge of her own life. So then the wedding was all set up, and the big feast was planned throughout all of Camelot. And on the wedding day, the witch was there, and she was her repugnant self. And after the ceremony, there was a big banquet, and she was sitting up at the head table, and she was just, you know, no manners, no table manners, just being awful. And Gawain was just waiting on her hand and foot, you know, asking her what he could get for her, pulling out her chairs, just treating her like a queen. And after the meal was over, then the hour approached, and Gawain was steeling himself for the horrific experience of entering the bedroom. Finally, he got up enough nerve and he went in. And what he saw was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life sitting on the bed. And he was shocked. And this beautiful creature said, "You have been so kind to me that for my wedding present to you, I will be my beautiful self one half of the time, and I will be my witchy self one half of the time. And you choose. Do you want me to be beautiful at night when we're together and alone? And be my witchy self during the day as we go throughout the kingdom doing whatever we need to do? Or would you like me to be my beautiful self during the day as we go throughout the kingdom and be my witchy self at night? My gift to you is that one half of the time I will be my beautiful self. Which would you like?" Queen thought about it for a minute. What would you say? Well, if you were him, what would you say? What would you say? You know, that's a tough question. So he thought about it for a minute, and then he said, I will let you choose for yourself. And upon hearing this, she said that she would be beautiful all of the time because he respected her enough to let her be in charge of her own life. So the moral of the story is, if your woman doesn't get her own way, things are going to get ugly. I love that story. And I love it because it goes both ways. It goes both ways. Now, think about your expectations in marriage and the things that make you unhappy. Usually it's connected to when you don't get your own way, right? I feel like he should be leading out in family home evening every week, and he doesn't do it. Therefore, I'm a little bit ticked. I think that he should, as the man of the house, and I only have little kids, I think he should empty the garbage. I mean, my dad always did. I think that he should mow the lawn. I think he should lead out in family home evening and family history, because that's what a good priesthood leader does. I think that every time I'm upset, he should listen to me and not fix it. Just listen. Not tell me what to do. So the thing about it is if you turn it around, for men, it's the same thing. They become frustrated when they don't get what they want, when it isn't according to what their expectation is supposed to be. The difference is that we handle it differently, because men and women are different, and we handle it differently. Let me share this quote, and I think this is in your syllabus. This is from, it was written in a column by Jenkins Lloyd Jones in the Deseret News on June 12th of 1973. But it was quoted by President Hinckley, and therefore it's in the church is usually attributed to President Hinckley. But he's quoting a quote from the Deseret News, and he said, "Anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he's been robbed. The fact is that most putts don't drop, most beef is tough, most children grow up just to be good people, most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual toleration." That's an interesting word to connect with a marriage. Mutual, both of you, toleration. Most jobs are more often dull than otherwise. Life is like an old-time rail journey, delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts, interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride. So when we have the unreal expectation that the majority of life in the relationship is supposed to be the continuation of the infatuation period, that could be an unreal expectation. And so our view or our of what marriage, a good marriage, looks like needs to become focused on what the Lord sees marriage as, and not what the world tells us marriage should look like. Now, we get our view, perhaps, of what a marriage should look like from Hallmark. But you notice they never really get into marriage. They just get two. And it usually happens in 2 days, a week or 2 days. That's not real. And so, that, or we look at movies or books or just fantasizing, and we think that the real marriage is this eternal infatuation period. And that is a little bit of an unreal expectation, because real marriage, the way the Lord has viewed marriage, and the Lord's vision of marriage, is two people coming together. And this vision, if you will, is taught in the Proclamation on the Family. It's taught in the Great Plan of Happiness. That's where marriage is defined by the Lord. And so if you read those and study those, then you come to realize that a good celestial marriage is a partnership. It's a partnership where men and women bringing different gifts come together to create a righteous family by learning to communicate, nurture, support, understand one another and their children. And that is a process of learning and growing. But my concern is that we can't learn and grow to it if we don't have the vision of what it is. If we always retain this faulty view of what marriage should be, then it's not a wonder that we become dissatisfied in it and reach a point where we just feel like emotionally we want to back out. We don't want a divorce because the church doesn't condone divorces, but we just don't want to really be in it anymore. And so what we want to talk about today then is, what do you do to get past that? Now that usually starts to hit about year 5. And you'll find that in most marriages, about year 5, couples will do a reassessment. And it's like, boy, I thought by now we would be out of school, we would have a good job, we'd be into a house, we would be, have a couple of kids, but things would start picking up. And so, and they may be, that may be right where you are. And it may not be where you are. But you also do a little evaluation of where you are in your relationship, in thinking, boy, I thought we would still be, woohoo, having these strong, and yet feelings, because of real life kicking in and what happens, feelings are different. And it doesn't mean they're wrong. But you have to have the understanding that love is going to continue to look differently. So as you get into this 5-year range, that's when you need to look at yourself and say, what am I expecting from love? And if you feel like your expectation is what they should be giving you, they're not understanding me, they're not giving me what I need, I'm not feeling, as treasured and as cherished as I used to, and you're taking inventory that way. So am I happy in my marriage because what's happening here? I'm not getting what I feel like I want and need. Then I tell you that's the wrong evaluation. Because love is not getting things, but doing things for the one you love. the one you've committed to. So the question is not, what am I getting? But the question is, am I serving? Am I giving? Am I making my marriage intentional? Now, in the scriptures it says, and I love this is verse 32 of Alma, and those of you who are returned missionaries will read this scripture differently than I'm going to. Your homework assignment number 1 is I want you to go through these few verses in Alma that I'm going to tell you. It's starting with verse 37 to the end. And I want you to, and I invite you to. I hate it when people just tell me to write my scriptures. You can't tell me what to do with my scriptures. They're mine.
What chapter are you in?
It shows you a little bit rebellion in me. Alma 32. Alma 32. If you would like to, you may do what I've done in my scriptures, and that is we're going to change some verbiage. And, you know, when we have the scriptures, we need to realize they're written, and this one is written with, it's talking about the seed of faith, but you can apply it to a lot of things, and it's still true. That's the beauty of parables. That's the beauty of scriptures. They say one thing, but they apply to so many. So we're going to change some of the words in this. If you have your electronics, you can follow me. If you, I don't know if this is in the syllabus or not. Anyway, I don't think this is in there, but anyway, it's great. And I want you to, homework is Alma chapter 32, starting with verse 37. And if you want to read along on in your scriptures, you'll see what I'm saying. If not, and you listen carefully, you'll get it. If you go home and read it today, you'll get it. You'll remember it. So this is what it is. And behold, as the marriage beginneth to grow, ye will say, let us nourish it with great care, that it may get root, that it may grow up and bring forth love unto us. Now, do you remember when you were in those, at that time where my grandchildren are, it was, we are going to have the best marriage in the whole wide world. Ours is going to be so much better than our parents. I mean, Mom and Dad, they kind of argue. We're never going to fight. We're never going to argue. We're always going to be just right on the same page and just love each other. And you better have thought that. I mean, you should have thought that in the beginning, that you thought you would have the very best marriage ever in the history of the world. That you should start there. But do you see what this is saying? And so you're saying, yes. And now behold, now here comes the if. And now behold, if ye nourish it with much care. What does much care mean? That's intentional. If you think about it, if you plan for it, if you take time for it, that's much care. So if you nourish it, take care of it, it will get root. And it will grow up and bring forth the love you desire. But it's the if. Then it goes on verse 38. But if ye neglect the marriage and take no thought for its nourishment, behold, it will not get root. Now, think about that. So if ye neglect your marriage, becoming busy with children, become busy with church callings, become busy with your hobbies, busy with all of the things that life demands of you, plus your husband is busy with those things that life demands of him, do you see how you just sort of fall into parallel lives? You cross at home, meaning in the home environment, but instead of connecting and intertwining, your lives just sort of brush each other. They're not connected anymore. Oh, you're doing logistics about where are you going and how was your day and da-da-da-da. But that real deep intertwining, the connecting, isn't there anymore. And it isn't because you don't love each other. Don't get me wrong. You're not planning on a divorce. You don't But it's just that you're sort of in these parallel zones where you're taking care of your responsibility and he's taking care of his responsibilities, and everything's fine at home. But this intertwining of you two individually is not being nourished with intent. With intent. So he says, if you take no thought for the nourishment, behold, it will not get root. It's not going to go deep. It's not going to withstand trials. And then, when the heat of the sun cometh and scorcheth it. Now, what's the heat of the sun in a marriage? That's financial problems, that's health problems, that's difficult children problems, that's loss of a job problems, that's anything, that's the dishwasher breaking and the car breaking and the computer going out. These are all things, these little trials are all things that scorcheth the relationship. Because it hath no root, it withers away, and ye pluck it up and cast it out. So, pluck it up and cast it out. In marriage, I don't think you're cast it out like get a divorce. I don't think that. But I think what it means here is we cast out the commitment to stay in a problem to the end until it's resolved. We get into blaming and finding fault and taking offense instead of coming together to resolve issues in love and peace and walk together with the issue in love and peace, working together towards a solution. Instead, we become enemies, if you will. I expect you to get that fixed. Why haven't you done that? Why have you? And how come you're always boobing at me? And don't you understand what I'm doing? You see, we become in conflict. We're at war with each other. And so what we cast out is closeness and being intertwined and working through to the end in finding a peaceful solution. Does that make sense? When things get hard, what did I tell you when we talked about work? Work till they're crying. Work past comfort so they learn to stick in hard things. What did I talk to you about service? Do a service project that requires sacrifice, that requires you to give beyond what's convenient or easy. The reason why is because it's these principles that keep you in a marriage. That when things get tough, you don't say, I quit. I'm out of here. Whether it means divorce, which most times it doesn't. But hey, divorce in the church is about 50%. So a lot of them do bail with divorce. But a lot who then are the other 50% have bailed in just backing out of the relationship, becoming emotionally divorced, if you will. And what we have to do is, with the tenacity that we've learned from service and work and gratitude, stay in it without taking offense until we resolve. And a lot of times that comes from learning to have more realistic expectations and backing out of blame and not thinking that I'm always right. So this goes on to say that you pluck it up and cast it out. Now this is not because the marriage is not good. Neither is it because the love thereof would not be desirable. But it is because your heart is barren. And ye will not nourish the marriage. Therefore, ye cannot have the love thereof. So, too often, we get our feelings hurt. We take offense. We back out. And therefore, we don't nourish the marriage. So the key of what we're trying to learn today is then, how do we nourish the marriage? How do we go about that process of nourishing with intent the marriage? Because you have to have a vision of what that looks like. Can I have a vision of what can I do? Now, that's what we're going to talk about. Now let me give the parenthesis. You can do everything that's right. But if your focus is, okay, Sister Tanner, I'll do this so that he'll change, then that's wrong. You're still doing it with the wrong intent. Does that make sense? Your intent has to be that you change you. That you try to develop you into a celestial person. And a celestial person is one who learns how to not take offense, to not require they always have the right their own way, that allows other people agency, that learns to support and sustain and lift those who may be struggling, and that may be your spouse rather than a child. So this lesson is for you, and it's not for you to keep a tally sheet on unless you're tallying your own success. That's all. But you don't get to take this class to go home and tally for your spouse. So let's go back to in the beginning when you're in this infatuation period. I remember when I was first married, when I was engaged to Mike, I thought he was the most perfect person that walked the earth. But I also knew that he had flaws. And because just normal people have flaws. And so even in the beginning, most of us realized that our spouse is what I call 80-20. They were about 80% absolutely fabulous and just what we wanted. But they were also normal, you know, and so they probably had a few things that were irritants. Now, this is not my husband. I don't want you to think I'm talking about my husband. I'm not. I'm giving you an absolutely hypothetical example because I don't want anybody to go home thinking this is my husband. If you ever meet him, and you'll go, you know, I don't want you to, this is totally hypothetical. So with that being said, let's just say that perhaps you dated a guy who has allergies. I have grandchildren with allergies, so I can use this. I mean, they're too little to be married yet, but. So you date somebody who has allergies. And because they have allergies, in different seasons of the year, allergies are awful. They are awful. It's like having a continuous head cold. And so they tend to sniff. You know, and you know they have allergies. And so you're so compassionate and understanding, and it's okay, and bless you. Oh, I just love you so much. You know, I'm so sorry you have allergies. Now you've been married 10 years. And now you're sitting next to him somewhere, even at home, watching a movie or whatever, and all of a sudden you hear, it is no longer this, oh, you poor thing, you have allergies. It's, could you stop that? Go get it, blow your nose. Let me get you clean. You see, the 20% that in the beginning you used to just think, it's okay. You know, now becomes your commitment to change. And so you look at the 80% and you love them, and the 20% you overlook, and then you say, I do, and then the 20% now becomes your focus. I'm going to help this man become so good, so I'm going to help him overcome all of this stuff. Well, no man wants to be parented. So as you turn and start focusing on the 20%, what happens? You become dissatisfied. You become dissatisfied. So the key is to stay focused on the 80%. Satan, there's a quote on page 100 by David Bednar. Says the adversary's attack upon eternal marriage will continue to increase in intensity, in frequency, and sophistication. Today we are engaged in a war for the welfare of marriage and the home. So you can expect that it's part of living in this dispensation, in this timetable, where we are, that Satan is going to attack and focus on and seek to destroy your marriage. And the thing about it is that in his doing it, he will do it in subtle, subtle, subtle ways. It's not going to be these big woohoo things. You're going to see it in very subtle ways that he will seek to drive little wedges in that he hopes eventually will crack the relationship. And it starts with working on the heart of the mother. It starts in working on the woman and breaking her down and helping her feel discontent. Now, as soon as I say that, I know that somewhere in the audience is someone who says, no, I'm the woman, I'm so committed to the marriage, and it's him that has left. And they are leaving. Men are becoming tempted by and addicted to pornography and the internet and so many things. So it's not just one way, but so very often it starts in the heart of the woman. And that's what we need to look at, because that's what we control, except for two of you. And then you have to look at your heart and where you are, because the principles are the same. So what I want to do, if you go to page 101, I want you to look at this list. These are the tools that Satan uses to drive wedges into marriage. These are the things that he seeks to divide you in subtle ways, so subtle that when he uses them, you don't acknowledge Satan. You say, oh, my spouse is bad, or I wish they would change, or I wish something would be different. The marriage is really not very fun anymore. That you don't acknowledge that it's Satan. And what you need to do is acknowledge that it's Satan and cast him out. Because if you acknowledge it's him, it's easier for you to work on these things. If you blame your spouse for it, you have absolutely no power over it. And if you blame yourself, sometimes we don't take power over it, we just get depressed. So with those things, that's why I say you listen to this for you. So the first thing is unreal expectations. And that is for you to look, what do you expect out of your marriage? If you have a quiet evening at home where you're talking to each other after the kids are gone to bed, but there's no woohoo big sparks and let's go have a party and all this, do you realize that that's a wonderful evening of being together, of bonding, of sharing? And so if the expectation is we have to always have this high energy, woohoo, that's a little bit, that's an unreal expectation. Or if you expect that he will always act like your father did, if you look at your father as your hero, and therefore you use him as the what a person should be, that's not fair to your spouse. He didn't grow up. He wasn't taught. He didn't learn the same things. So can your husband do the same things your dad did? The answer is yes. But they have to be taught in a kind and gentle way that that's what you want. That's what you need. But our tendency is, as we ask them to do certain things, or our expectation is that we become critical. And we become, why aren't you? Of course, any husband would know they're supposed to take out the garbage. Not necessarily. Maybe his mother always did it. Or maybe an older brother always did it. We can't assume. So one of the most important things that you can do in this is learning how to talk to each other and tell each other what you need. It's very interesting to me as I talk to women and I ask them what they really need, like in the story with Wayne, what do women really want? What do you really want? Most of them don't know. They can't tell me what they need or what they want. They can just tell me in great detail what they're not getting or what they don't want. But how can they teach a spouse what they need or want if they don't know themselves? Without criticizing. And I truly mean not criticizing. How can you say what you need? So that's one of the things we're going to talk about here in a minute. Let's go through the tools a little bit more. The second one is focusing on flaws. That's the changing of the 80-20 to the turning it around. So now I'm focused on the 20%, and I am focused on correcting them for you with the guise of helping you to be a better person. We do not parent our spouses. Don't parent your spouse. Number 3 is keeping score. Satan has us do a tally sheet. I did the dishes last night, it's your turn tonight. I put the kids to bed last night, it's your turn tonight. I promise you, in a real marriage, it's kind of a give and take. There's times when mom needs a lot of help because of the things that she's involved in and stresses that she has. And there's times when dad's going to be out of town or gone or whatever, and then he needs a lot of support from mom. So there's times when each of you, it's a give and take, when each of you need a great deal of backup and support from the other person. And if you're keeping tabs, then you destroy it, because it's not even, it's just life. And we made the commitment when we were married to give our whole self to the well-being of the other person, and that means not keeping score. That means giving myself. And that doesn't mean I will give myself every other time, and every other time you better give yourself. It means I will give my whole self. My whole commitment will be to make you happy. Now there's a saying that goes that in marriage, unfortunately, sometimes we focus on it as making the other person good. So like I would want to make my husband good. That's correct all of his flaws, so that he could make me happy. That's his responsibility, is to make me happy, and my responsibility is to make him good. And that's exactly backwards. My responsibility is to make me good, to have me repent, to have me overcome my weaknesses, and my responsibility is to nourish him and make him happy, and not keep score on that. Next one, silent treatment. Both men and women are equally have problems with this. A silent treatment is an adult 2-year-old temper tantrum. That's all. That's all it is. And there is nothing that is cute or wonderful or nice about an adult temper tantrum. And so some say, in our marriage we never argue. I don't believe in fighting. And so I refuse to fight. I will not argue. And so if we have a disagreement, instead, I just go silent. Well, whatever you want. And say, oh, I'm not arguing. So aren't I good? Because I've never argued. I don't argue. I've never had an argument in my marriage. Well, silent treatment shuts the door to resolution. If you won't discuss and work through and put all of your wants without strings attached and without taking offense on a table to discuss, then no resolution can be made. So you may not be arguing, but you're maybe doing something worse than just shutting the door. And that shuts the door to resolution, and it shuts the door to hearts.
Just a testimony to that, we're both divorced, and this is our second marriage. So we don't hold anything back. We do what you say. It's why hold stuff back? It's not worth it. And if any of you are in your first marriage, I would say this is great counsel, because if you hold stuff back, you don't get stuff resolved. You don't. I'm just echoing in a testimony.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What happens is, okay, so I don't stay in it till resolution, and what I do, as women, you men will have to tell me if it's true for you, but women will automatically take that I didn't get my way and put it in my backpack. And the next time I'll put that in my backpack. And the next time I put that in my backpack. And then you continue to carry these unresolved issues that may or may not even mean anything. But because it wasn't resolved, it starts building up bitterness and anger and withdrawal. Yes?
So what if, like, I feel like sometimes, when we have an argument, sometimes we are so blind in our side that it's hard for us to really be open to the other person. And I felt like if we give it a few, like a half hour or a little bit of time for us to calm down and be more willing to communicate, because trying to communicate for us sometimes seems like it's this argument that just goes over and over, and we are arguing forever, and I don't like that.
You're exactly right.
Is that okay? I mean, so I feel like sometimes I am giving him the silent treatment because I don't want to argue.
The silent treatment comes if it's not an agreed thing. If you say, you know what, we're both pretty intense about this, let's wait for an hour and then come back. Then that's not silent treatment. But if it is, fine. That's silent treatment. If it's agreed and negotiated together to come back and discuss it later, that's not silent treatment if you put time to let it cool. The other thing is, and this will be on our lesson in communication. I don't want to go really there right now. That's a whole 2 hours next semester. But if you get in that situation, before you try to express your opinion with real intent, repeat their opinion back to them to as many times as it takes until they feel like you understand what they're saying. And then you can begin to say what your viewpoint, which is different. And if they will repeat back your viewpoint, you will find that puts a basis down where you really can discuss without anger or without taking offense. What causes offense is when we feel like they don't understand where we're coming from. And so we're both so busy making our right known, our right known, and wanting it. And it's not who's right or who's wrong. Communication only happens when you have created understanding. That's when you communicate. It has nothing to do with speaking or listening. It has everything to do with understanding. So when they feel understood, then they will seek to understand. And that takes out this silent treatment thing. But we'll spend 2 hours on teaching you how to actually communicate so that you can come to understanding.
I like that, and kind of over the last year, one thing that my husband's been doing, like when we discuss things and a lot in business, is the line he keeps saying is, what I'm hearing you say is, and then he'll repeat, like you said, and I'm surprised at how often it's not even, I have not explained myself even remotely close to how he didn't pick up on it, and so it's actually been a really good thing. He always says the same thing, so I've been starting to say that, like, okay, what I'm hearing you say is, and then you go like, am I getting that right? And then we can move forward, because it's amazing how you may feel like you've articulated perfectly, and yet maybe I'm still missing, maybe I haven't even explained it as well.
And you know what? That's next semester's marriage class. Men and women hear and say things differently. So we have to learn how to understand. Like, he's not understanding you. You probably explained it so that any other woman would know exactly what you were talking about. But any other man would go, you kidding me? I didn't get that at all. So it's a him-her thing that we'll talk about next semester when we talk about the differences between men and women. Because, boy, there's some differences.
To answer your question about the backpack, you asked, do men
backpack?
Do men backpack? I think, yes, we might backpack a few things at first, but I cut the strap and throw it, and I'll never come back to it, and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
But
And I think that's most men.
I think that's what we
I don't
do
think
is-
men are not emotional basket cases. Women are. We keep it all. We want to retain it, and we want to save it. Emotional issues. And they kind of let it go, which can create different kinds of problems. So, but we'll talk about that when we talk about differences in men and women. Don't you love it when I say we're not going to do that? Okay, the next one is electronics. And that, Satan uses electronics to divide us. And that is when you're on your phone too much, that you can't carry on a conversation. Where you need to have couple time at night where all phones are docked so that you can talk to each other. That needs to happen at least 15 minutes to a half hour every night. You need to have talk time at night. And some of you will find it very difficult to get past superficials in your talk time because you haven't had them very well. You either get emotional when you're not happy, or you don't know how to share deep things anymore. And we have to learn how to share deep things. I don't know if you remember when you were dating, you would go, if you, like a lot of couples, we were at BYU, and he would call me in the morning at 6 o'clock. He was my alarm clock. So he would call me at 6 o'clock, and we'd talk on the phone for a few minutes. Then we'd meet up at campus. And then in between our classes, we would be in the library together, and we would talk and talk and talk. And then he would go to work. He worked at the MTC and teaching, and so he would go and teach at the MTC. And when he got off work, then he would call me, and we would talk and talk and talk. And then you would have a date night, and you'd talk and talk and talk. And you never talked about kids, and you never talked about money. What'd you talk about?
Dreams.
But we now don't talk about that. So what were those things? Those are the things you have to rebuild your relationship. Say, well, we don't have anything to talk about. Then read an article, and then at night share it with them. That's intentional. After we talk about intentionally nourishing, we have the problem of, you can read the rest of those, but we have the problem of, saying, well, we just don't have anything to talk about. Or we don't have date night because he doesn't ask me out on dates. Who said he has to plan the dates? That's your next homework assignment. Women, you are assigned your homework assignment. Keep me a list of these, would you? I'm not remembering what I'm doing. I want you to plan a hot date. I don't mean hot. I mean hot. I want it to be different. I want it to be something maybe you haven't done for a while. Think back to what you did when you were first, dating or first married, when you didn't have any money. It cannot involve anything electronic. You cannot go to a movie. You can't watch a video. You can't do gaming, even if gaming is your very favorite thing to do. I'm sorry, that's out for this one day. I want you to plan it. I want you to get the babysitter and ask them out and have a good date, a different date, a creative date. And you take care of all of those things that you have to take care of to make this date happen. And it will certainly be a surprise to him when you do it. Okay, so what we're going to do is now in this last little bit, we've talked about Satan's tools, we've talked about the life of a marriage, if you will, that it grows into something that's beautiful and wonderful and just so deep. It's just hard to explain how deep and wonderful it can become. You've shared all life's experiences together. You've gone through all that. There's nobody in the world who knows you better, who struggled with you more, who understands than this mate that you've had. I'm in a time of my life now with our 50th wedding anniversary coming up where I'm an empty nester, and I live in a ward, and the ward, they don't know all my children. They don't know my grandchildren. They don't know my profession, what my education was. They don't know the experiences I've had in nursing. They don't know the experiences I've had with death and with life, but my spouse does. Mike knows those things and holds my heart with tender hands because he's been there with me. And so my responsibility then is to hold his heart with tender hands. Because believe me, I'm not perfect. And he's not either. But I don't want him to condemn me. I don't want to condemn him. You reach a point where, remember when King Lamoni said, I'll give up all my sins? And you reach a point after you've truly worked on nourishing a marriage where you would say, I will give up all of my condemnations, all of my criticism, all of my, to hold you safe, to help you have one safe place here on earth. And I want to hold your heart there. Now, remember I said you don't do it for, it's not reciprocal. Some of you are saying, oh, I wish somebody would hold my heart there. It's not. It's, can you be a safe place for someone? Can you be that safe place? I have a picture at home on my wall. I was going to bring it, I forgot. It is a picture of my parents' hands. You know when you get married and you have the wedding pictures of the rings and the hands, and usually with over the bouquet or whatever, and just a close-up so you can see the rings. This is a picture of my parents' hands. And it was taken on the 6th of October in 1973. And my mother passed away on the 20th of December in 1973. So 2 months later, my mother passed away. As the picture was taken, she was battling lung cancer. But the picture is of my parents' hands, and I look, my dad, when he was young, had a tip of one of his fingers cut off in an accident. You know, I look at those hands, and I see all of the age marks on their hands that have become very familiar to me over the years, and I see my dad's hands with his ring and my mom's rings, and withered, bent with arthritis. My mother's fingers were bent. Mine are bending in the same way, too. I guess it's hereditary. But that is the picture of an eternal marriage. It's not the young one. That's the picture of you are sealed to become based on your capacity to serve one another in the Lord. And at that end was a picture of a celestial marriage where they've had a lifetime of serving and giving to one another. That's a celestial marriage. It's not always getting your own way. It's not always being happy. It's not always feeling this infatuation. It's being committed to doing loving things and holding someone's heart in a safe place. So if you go to page 103, this is the list, if you will, of things that you can do. You know me, I'm a lister. Of things that you can think about. These are not absolutes, and these are not, you know, there can be things added to it. This is not only. This isn't the end. There's a lot of things that you can do. But if you don't have a vision and an idea of where to begin, then these can give you an idea. The first one is, remember what you did when you were falling in love. Remember at the beginning, what dates did you have? What did you do? What things made you bonded? In the beginning, when Mike and I were dating and had no money and were poor college students, one of our favorite things to do would be to go to the truck stops. Gas stations are a fabulous place, and look at the cards and read cards. And some of them are really, really funny. I mean, we didn't have money to go buy cards, so we'd go read all these cards and say, okay, this is the one I would buy for you, or this is the one I think is you. And we would stand there in the store, spending no money at all, laughing and laughing and laughing, and then go get an apple fritter and split it. Because we had about 50 cents. That's about what we had for our date night. So what were the things that you did? What were the things that you did? Maybe you went bike riding. Maybe you went on hikes. You know, what did you do? Do the remember when. And sometime, this is another homework, sometime during this week, I want you to have a remember when conversation with your spouse. And it doesn't have to be just when you were dating, but it has to be, bring up to memory any of those experiences that brought you close together. Do you remember when? Do you remember when? And just have a, you don't have to tell, you don't go to them and say, okay, I am on assignment. I have to have a remember when conversation with you. Do you remember when? You got to be a little more subtle. So, but I want you to have a remember when conversation sometime during this week. Number 2, learn not to take offense. Learn, see, as we go from the beginning and the infatuation stage, we don't take offense. As we get into where love has to be developed and be nourished, we tend to take offense more. And the reason, I think, part of the reason is because in the beginning, we look at people for their intentions. And we know that that man that we're going to marry or have just married doesn't intend to hurt us. But his actions may have done something that are a little bit hurtful. But as we get into marriage further, then we don't focus on intentions, we focus on actions. And so we judge them on their actions and ourselves on our intentions. So you say, well, I didn't ever intend to hurt you. I mean, that wasn't my intention. Problem is, if there was hurt, then there needs to be something done to help heal the hurt. So, but we tend to look at ourselves on intention, so we don't take sometimes responsibility for some of our own behavior. And we look at them on their actions. So we have to choose not to take offense. It is a choice. It is a choice. And we have to choose to not take offense. Do you remember that story that President Uchtdorf told about the doily? It's here in your syllabus about the couple. How many of you have heard it? Okay, so you just read it, but it's so good. It is just so good, and it's here in here. Number 3, live within your means. Living within your means don't get undue debt, because that causes horrendous stress on a marriage. And to try to live within the means, pay tithes, pay offerings, pay those things that you need to pay. But it also means, women, don't complain. Oh, I wish we had a bigger house. I mean, I know we can't afford it, but I wish we had another car. Oh, I know we can't afford it, but I wish I had, a new wardrobe for this winter. I just don't have any clothes to wear. I wish we had. When you complain and teach your children, just by example, by the things that you say, to be dissatisfied, remember how you're not living an attitude of gratitude. But men are quiet, meaning they don't verbally complain, but they feel heavily the responsibility of providing for a family. And when all we can do is complain about what we don't have, I wish we had new carpet. Oh, I'll be so glad we can get some new furniture. Then it makes them feel like a failure. So it's live within your means and don't go into excess debt. But it also means be grateful for everything that you have and express that gratitude to the provider. Women typically are the ones who manage money, or a lot of it. Maybe they buy the groceries and they buy the things the kids need. And typically they are involved in handling a lot of money. And you need to do that wisely, with great care, and with great appreciation. Number 4, maintain complete fidelity and trust. Now, what I want you to understand is that means women should not, or men, either one, should not be confessing your spouse's sins to someone else. Women need the companionship with their husband, but women also need a companionship with a friend. They talk more. They just got to have a place. We would drown our poor husbands if we did all of our talking to them. And so we need an outlet, someplace to talk. But as you find that outlet, be careful that you do not confess your spouse's sins to someone else. You can talk about challenges in your life or whatever, but don't demean your spouse. Don't demean him to your mother or your sister or whoever is your confidant. Complete fidelity means that you're loyal all the time. It also means that you don't go on chat groups or the internet and find an old boyfriend or girlfriend that used to be really good friends with, and now you just want to see what's happening to them, and now you become internet friends again. That we are careful and mindful of relationships that we have in the ward. We need to be very mindful of the fidelity in our relationship. And we can say, well, you know, I love my husband. And we just get together. You start flirting with someone else, and it's, people can see it. You can be happy and be pleasant and not be flirty. I think in more cases than we want to recognize, that's where problems start. If there's a little tiny bit of frustration in a marriage, and then another male is or female is really friendly and so solicitous about your problems, it starts driving wedges. The fidelity needs to always be there. Always. Always be there. The fidelity. Okay, number 5. You yourself personally live the gospel. You see that you read your scriptures. You see that you say your personal prayers. You see that you have regular attendance at the temple. You seek to support your spouse in their spiritual goals. So there's a difference between you setting a spiritual goal for them and you supporting them in their spiritual goals. Now this right here is where women say, well, he just won't lead home evening. He just doesn't do it. He just doesn't do it consistently. I know it's right. And number 1, that's criticism. Don't do it. Number 2, the question is always, if you love them, meaning love is doing loving things, what would be my focus? It's how can I help you, not how can I change you. So it's not you need to change and do this right. It's how can I help you. So then you approach your husband and say, you know, family home evening, do you want to have it Sunday or Monday night? What can I do to help? I know you're busy. How can I help you? Do you see the difference in the feeling of that? That's nourishing versus, well, are you going to do a family home evening? What are you going to do? Do you see one's condemning and critical? One is nourishing and supportive. But one is where your husband becomes very gentle and wants your support. And one, he'll back away because he feels condemned, and probably he'll have a harder time doing those things that you want done. So a lot of it depends on how you approach them. Number 6, daily, consciously look for the good in your spouse. In this one, I have often suggested that you get a whiteboard. And they're cheap at Walmart, just a little whiteboard. Put it in your bedroom or your bathroom or a place that's, it's just private. It's just between you and your spouse. It's not for your children. If you want to do it for your children, that's okay. But what we're talking about today is just between the two of you. And every day, write something on the board that you love about them. In specifics. And the next day, write something else. And then the next day, write something else. And the next day, write something else. I gave this at a husband and wife fireside one time and challenged them to, if they would like to do that. And about 3 weeks later, I was somewhere, and one of the men that had been in that fireside came up to me and he said, I just want you to know, Sister Tanner, that doesn't work. And I said, oh, why? Why? What happened? And he said, I went right out the next day and I got the whiteboard and I put it up and I wrote something on there every day for 2 weeks, and she never wrote a thing. And I said, that wasn't the purpose. You see, if you do it with that intent of what I get back, don't do it. Don't do it, because you're doing it wrong. That's manipulating, trying to manipulate them. So don't do it. But if you can do it as a gift, and you don't care if something comes back, your goal is to hold them in a safe place, so you want to do it to them, then it's a really wonderful thing to do. Be quick to say, I'm sorry, whether you're right or wrong. Just say those words. Spend time together. That's your date night. Spend time together. It's almost impossible to have warm, sensitive, caring feelings with someone you never spend time with. And so this has to be individual time. This isn't time with children. This is individual, so you can reconnect the two of your souls together. Learn your spouse's love language and learn to say, I love you in their language, not yours. My husband's is physical touch. And I'm a person who kind of likes a bubble around me. So it's not the same. But if I want to say I love you to him, then it's physical. It's hugging him, it's sitting close to him, it's holding his hand. And I must be willing to do that because I want him to feel that. So a lot of you don't even know what your love language is. Your responsibility is to figure out what it is and then to share that with your spouse. We want to hold them accountable for helping us feel loved, and yet we don't tell them what it is that makes us feel loved. So the accountability is you have to teach them, and you have to learn from them what their love language is. Number 10, meet and greet at the crossroads. Every day, walk them to the door when they leave and be there when they come home. That says, I'm so glad to have you home. I'm so excited that you're home. Meet and greet. And that should be done with a physical touch. Number 11, be kind. But for women, it is be kind, but it's more than that. It's be happy. And be happy in ways that your happiness shows. In other words, tell your face. Smile. Sing. Laugh. You used to. Do it again. Be happy and create sunshine in your home. That makes him feel like he's providing your needs because you're happy. So be happy. Just have an aura of happiness about you. Number 12, take responsibility for your own emotional needs. For women, know your cycle. When that's coming up and we get a little PMSing, we tend to blame them then for our being unhappy or discontent, or it's their fault. And it's not. And we need to keep track of that. When we're depressed for something, we need to know what things it is that makes us happy. We need to take responsibility to learn how to get ourselves out of a hole. That's our responsibility, to get ourselves out, whether it's go for a walk or do exercise or eat a chocolate bar or whatever it takes to get yourself out of the funk. Do it. Do it. And recognize that that's your responsibility not theirs. It's always wonderful when they help, but it's your responsibility. Number 13, avoid unreal expectations. We talked a lot about that already. Be sure that your expectation is real and stop criticizing. And number 14 is really good because it's a way to help us avoid unreal expectations. And that is, and we're going to talk about this when we do communication, but learn to say what you want. Have you ever, just come home and you just don't say what you want. You look at the garbage that hasn't been emptied, that's kind of overflowing, and you think, how come you can't empty the garbage? You're standing right next to it. How come you can't empty it? And we just let these thoughts go through our head and just get mad. But we don't say, could you empty the garbage? Where most men would just say, fine, yeah, thanks, I'll go do it. Some of you, even now, are discouraged because your husband's always so busy and never has time to spend with you. And then on Saturday watches football games or plays screens or whatever, and so you're always saying, how come we never have time together? How come you're always playing on your games? How come you're doing, and thinking that that's going to motivate him. It's not a guessing game. Men don't do guessing games well. They just don't do it well. So instead of all of that, say what you want. Honey, I would love it if you could spend 1 hour with me on Saturday and help me rake the leaves. I'd probably say fine. But say what you want. Not, boy, the yard's sure looking ugly, man. We ought to get those leaves right. Usually that means you ought to. But we ought to say what you want and be very clear. And that really, really helps in communication. And number 15, remember it's a term marriage, and go to the temple. Go to the temple whether you go with them or not. But it's good to go with them. And remember those covenants. And stand together in the prayer circle. And remember the bonds that brought you together. And remember that these are for eternity. These will last forever. I just want to share with you this little bit of this story that's at the end. What have I given you as homework? See if I gave it to you all. A fun date. Remember when. The whiteboard. And your conference talk is by Elder Larry Lawrence. It's called What Lack I Yet? November 2015. And I want you to read it with the question in mind, what do I need to do to nourish the marriage? What do I need to do to nourish the marriage? Who is that by? Larry Lawrence, Elder Lawrence, November 2015. Okay, I told you a little bit about my mother and the Hans picture that they had taken just before she passed away. She lived back east when she passed away. She lived in Missouri, and I went back to visit with her and was there the 3 weeks. I went back the 1st of December, and I was there till the 19th, so I was there until just before she passed away. And I noticed something that was very interesting. My dad, who was a military captain, very straight and strict when I was growing up, now had just become, in this marriage, in learning how to live married, this, I want you to get the image of this picture, because this is what marriage is all about. This is marriage. This is what it is to be a couple. When supper was cleared away, Dad would support Mother's slight weight and help her into the bathroom, trailing the bubbling transparent oxygen tube. There he would tenderly undress her and, slipping out of his own clothes, hold her failing body against himself while he washed her in the shower and shampooed her hair. After their shower, he would help her to the side of the rented hospital bed, where he perched her for dressing her in her nightgown. I was deeply touched by his tender care of her, how totally absorbed he became in these simple tasks as he softly brushed the limp hair back from her forehead. But then would come my favorite scene of all, the one most deeply etched in memory, that was to forever epitomize this experience in the season for me. On stiff knees from his own 70 years, Dad knelt at the floor at Mother's feet, tipping the contents of a fragrant pink bottle of lotion into the palms of his hands and rubbing them together. He applied the soothing lotion ever so carefully to the delicate, dry skin of her legs and feet. Bent there before her, the glow of his snow-white hair in the tiny Christmas lights almost gave him the appearance of a holy man. A holy man. Images of two distinct silhouettes converged into one in my mind, of one who knelt now in love and service in the stillness of this tiny room, another, much younger, much longer ago, who knelt in a similar way to wash the feet of the ones he loved. A holy man. They were 2,000 years apart, but they were one. The entire meaning of the sacred season told in a simple task. When marriage ceases to be an irritant and becomes a quest, when it's your quest to hold the heart of the one you have married in a safe, secure place, that's when marriages are sealed by the Holy Spirit of promise for eternity. I testify that we can become that kind of spouse, but it takes intentional nourishment to get there. I testify that this is the Lord's eternal plan. In his holy name.